But okay, let's start this. Night's getting young.
The night's getting young.
The night is getting young. The day is young. The night is young. Everyone's night is young. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our sort of continuation of reviews on the back of our Strange New Worlds review. We thought we would pivot out and actually start doing rewatches and sort of reviews of classic Trek and Trek new and old as we go through the various series. What are you laughing about?
We have one guy munching on cheese, and it's like
it's a bit of cheese.
a bit of cheese.
Cheese.
So we've started. We're starting now with The Cage, the pilot episode. I think our initial plan is we're going to go through the pilots. We'll go through each one. Next we'll go through. I was wondering if maybe we should go through, go to Where No One Has Gone Before, and then go to Encounter at Farpoint, Emissary, Caretaker. Maybe we'll talk about that. Once that's done, once we've gone through all the pilots, we will turn it over to our subscribers. So if you want to subscribe, you can go onto twitch.com/TimelinesTalks and subscribe to our channel, join our sub-channel on Discord, and we'll put a vote up to choose the next episode that we will watch after we've done the pilot. So look out for that, subscribers. But for now...
And don't worry, if you want it all to stop, that will be the sixth option on the poll.
Yeah, if we get nothing, then yeah, we will just do what we want.
It's going to be Threshold, a Wesley episode, or just stop. And those are your options.
Please just stop. We're begging you.
We've already done Threshold. That cheese gets bigger and bigger, Shy.
Hey, he's just munching on a piece of Susan Oliver's acting. It's fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, speaking of,
yeah,
he's metaphorically chewing the scenery the same way that Susan Oliver did.
Okay, so yeah, we've just finished watching The Cage. We sort of decided we'd watch it all together. So 1964 this was filmed. A few.
You couldn't tell.
You could not. Very different from Trek that we know and love. And fun little fact: this was not actually seen by anyone on television, aside from the scenes that were shot in the menagerie, until 1986 when it was released on VHS. So this was unheard of, heard of, and only shown by Gene Roddenberry at conventions from very limited black and white sources that he had. So it was very held under lock and key until I think it was the 20th anniversary when they finally released it on a
You know what I'm
VHS
picturing?
release.
I'm picturing someone going out to watch The Voyage Home, being like, "Man, I really love Star Trek," and then they go into their local video store and they see it's like, "Oh, look, Star Trek, the original pilot. I'll start there." And they pick this up, and it's like, you could not get a more tonally dissonant two examples of Star Trek, could you? You really couldn't.
Really?
Although both oddly preoccupied with breaking the time barrier.
Yeah, there was a few little oddities we noticed in this, as like, we've broken the time barrier, as he sort of states to the outpost, as what was it, Jose. What was his name?
Mr. Tyler.
Tyler.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah.
It's a joke for American friends there.
It's terrible.
Okay, guys. Opinions on the episode as a whole. How did you find it after? I mean, we've all watched that episode a fair few times in our Star Trek career, as it were.
Siskel and Ebert have donated their thumbs down for science on this one, so...
Yeah. So, I find it really weird looking at this versus TOS and Star Trek as a whole, because I would think if you're going to define Star Trek in any way, it's like it's morality plays and science fiction portrayed by character actors and people who do big acting. People don't generally do subtle acting on Star Trek. You get really good acting, but like subtle is not usually something that it's usually within the wheelhouse, but it's not usually what they asked for. I can't think of many instances of Star Trek being very subtle. And here it's very I'm trying to think of a word. It's trying to be cerebral. I think it's like, a lot more muted in some ways. Everyone other than Susan Oliver is very very cool and calm and collected, apart from when they're thinking about their horses, really. It's very different in style. It's a lot more grey, not just in colour palette, but also like like, who are your main personalities in this episode? You've got Captain Pike,
Hmm.
who is very thinly sketched out in this very first
Close
episode.
your eyes and think
Number
of Tango.
one, who is, yeah, exactly. You've got Spock, who is in maybe 3 scenes, and he's very de-emphasized. You have number one, who is gets a bit more focus on that, but only because she is considered a acceptable female option. And then you've got Boyce, and then you've got Vina, and it's everyone is very thinly sketched for a pilot. And that's not what I think of when I think of Star Trek pilots. I think of Picard screaming at Wesley to get off his bridge. I think of Cisco burning his feet on the beach. I think of Janeway screaming warp particles. I don't think of Captain Pike very just staring at Vina for long stretches of time. It's a very odd pilot in the wider scheme of things.
Well, when I think about what came before, any kind of science fiction around that time is going to take inspiration from Twilight Zone, because that was huge at the time, and they told stories that made you think, which I think is what Gene wanted to do originally. And then right before this, Lost in Space had a run. So, if you look back at the clownery that was, this is actually pretty highly evolved comparatively. So, of course, any pilot's going to try to find their footing, but I thought on balance they wanted to go for a more mature,
realistic, maybe.
Yeah, than the sort of. I mean, they weren't even in the bright primary red, blue, green colors. We got 2 of those 3 colors, so it's like they kind of wanted to be taken seriously the whole time.
Yeah, you don't have to primary colors and let the go.
They definitely swung for the fences on this one. You can tell there's a lot of promise. They went for the sex. They had a lot of action. They had a lot of like ray guns shooting. Yeah, they had weird aliens. They had weird alien planets, monsters. They went for everything. But in the end, you can see exactly why they reshot the pilot, because
it just doesn't quite gel, does it?
Yeah.
Speaking
it's sort of a lack of charm. I think.
Yeah, I think that's actually a fair thing, because that's the thing. You can say very many things about William Shatner, but he is, if nothing else, charming because of how he puts himself across on the screen, and he's very, very honest. I'd say with his acting, he doesn't ever hold anything back. Whereas you look at Mr. Hunter, and he is very restrained. He is very much a star in the old style of Hollywood filmmaking, where it's like lots of restrained the big jaw, the brooding. It's very much a different style of hero, and you can definitely see how they changed his character later on when they brought him back for Discovery of Strange New Worlds, because here he's very stoic.
Yeah, even it opens much in the same way Star Trek Beyond opens, as I mentioned, where Pike is actually thinking of quitting. He's just had some mysterious incident we haven't. Which I like that they don't describe it exactly, but it's something's gone
world building, yeah.
But he wants out. So, unfortunately, I don't know that this adventure is the adventure that would drag him back in. It would just confirm him wanting to retire.
Yeah, you would think that something that would bring back your zest for exploration and the wonders of like extraterrestrial life wouldn't be, we shoved you in a cell, made you like think of some illusions, and tried to sexually assault you in a way. It's not the kind of thing I think of when I'm looking for a big inspiration boost. It's like, I don't know if this was the right story to go for a pilot. Maybe like if they had tried to film that Rigel 7 incident where it was more action, a bit more high stakes, that would have probably been a bit easier to sell. This is very, I don't know if high concept is the word, but it's trying to be a bit more cerebral and a bit more about of a mediation on violence and the evolution of man and all these big ideas, but it doesn't really quite come across. I don't feel like it feels very small scale for what it's trying to grapple with.
But I like what they picked, though, because you have that sort of Twilight Zone-esque, being taken captive. They did swing for the fences with the sets. They went around to the different planets and did all that stuff. And then you have the whole illusion storyline. What can we believe? What can't we? And if you look at a lot of the TOS season 1 storylines, like Charlie X, and what a little girl's made of, and like lots of weird things that are like,
Mm.
that's even smaller scale than this. And sure, you have to go big for a pilot, but they did do that in some cases.
That's true. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because ideally with a pilot, you want to sort of get a good taster of everything that your series is capable of what you're generally looking at getting. And I suppose they thought that maybe going the illusion route and just, doing a quick rapid fire shot through, here's Mojave, here's Rigel 7, here's, the Thelosian planet, here's Hellas Towers 4, here's whatever weird planet they have Orion slave girls on. Don't think about it. Just don't think about it.
Yeah.
And it's like, look, here are all the...
Can we nominate that as most inappropriate comment of the whole? That was like even worse than Women on the Bridge was the whole line of just like, oh yeah, they like being taken advantage of. I just went, oh no, just stop it, 60s, please.
How about everything works? I kind of like that.
That wasn't great. That wasn't.
Yeah.
Sounds like I have that on my business card when I hand to clients. It's just like, yes, Captain Idol, everything works.
And it's like the fact that it's like that line about the Orion woman liking getting taken. It's like being delivered by a guy in a Starfleet standard issue leisure suit. Like that was on the budget for this episode. We had to budget that guy with the Starfleet insignia. It's like that's your role model for that's what your organization is capable of. It's like not what I would have gone with maybe, but
would you like to know what DeForest Kelly said when he watched this episode prior to being cast as McCoy? He said, well, I'm not going to do the accent. He says, well, I don't know what the hell it's all about, but it's either going to be the biggest hit or the biggest miss God ever made.
Not
wrong. The Southern charm. Yeah, not wrong.
But yeah, I mean, there's things like, there's the myth that people they didn't pick this up for pilot because of things like Major Roddenberry being a woman in Power. That wasn't true. Apparently, that was more they didn't like Major Barrett as an actress, and they didn't think she was good enough.
It was a combination of two things. A combination of that and the fact that I believe at this point Major Barrett was already sleeping with Gene Roddenberry, despite him being married. So that was the other big contributor. Yeah, I can definitely see why they didn't pick this up for initially, but they saw enough in it to go for a second go around.
Which was really rare. I mean, it's rare now for you to film a whole pilot, then to reject it and say, no, try again.
Yeah. Well, it happens every once in a while. Like Sherlock, the BBC Sherlock, they shot that entire pilot.
Oh, did
you
they?
can find it on YouTube or so. Yeah, it's interesting because he's less. Benedict Cumberbatch is less severe. This isn't a Sherlock podcast, but it's interesting to see like the adjustments that they made. Like,
because it's interesting looking at Pike versus Kirk, where it's like you can see a lot of that prototype going forward, where he's very much that. The charming, informed ability charming, because like Jeffrey Hunter is not projecting charisma at this point. But he's very heroic. He's very, he's good with the ladies. He's nostalgic for home. Like these are all elements that in some ways would come back with Kirk in some ways, but de-emphasizing other things. Like Kirk is a lot more take action. He's a lot more forward with women. He's a lot more sort of like depending on who you pick. Then you go with William Shatner. He's a lot more evocative and a lot more propulsive, as it were. Like you get a lot of that energy. Whereas here, it's a lot of non-dominant personalities. I'd say it's kind of like what you get. So there's not a big. That's you were joking about like Auto. It's like Susan Oliver is emoting for almost everyone else on this episode because, good God, she cannot stop gurning for the screen almost. Like she earned star credit.
Imagine if she hadn't. Like, would we have fallen asleep during a few of those scenes? Probably. So.
She took what she had and ran with it, I think, definitely. I think from a director's point of view, they just said to her, you are the emotion in this scene. Like, go nuts.
But she is the prepackaged in a can damsel in distress. So that's like, that was her whole role anyway. And she is desperately trying her best to get some kind of reaction out of Pike. So it's understandable from like an in-universe point of view, but it was delightful to watch either way.
It's a lot.
Yeah,
she's doing a lot.
Yeah. And like we're kind of like ragging on the pilot a little bit, and I feel like that's unfair because there is a lot of interesting things that this does. Especially, there's almost kind of a meta narrative here about almost about television. The fact that they continually keep on panning out to the televisions, watching what's going on. You know, the emphasis on action, romance, sex, like, you know, these like big things. And it's like, and then Pike being in, I say that he's a typical leading man. In some ways, he's not, because I don't think that even back in 1964, you would be quite so forward about him having emotional problems and him just feeling like tired and beaten down. Like, you know, I understand, obviously, it varies depending on your format and what you're getting across, but he is emotionally vulnerable in a way that I don't think a lot of, you know, 60s leading men were. Like, you think about James Bond, for example, like Goldfinger in the exact same year, there was no emotional vulnerability there, not really. Not in the way that Pike is trying to be, being put across as emotionally vulnerable, where he's tired, he doesn't want to do this anymore, he feels responsible for lives that he can't be responsible for, and he puts too much on himself. And that's an interesting dichotomy for your main character, but it is also a case of you've put him in this situation where he's emotionally dead, so it's not a great pilot situation. You know, it's like, really, you know, enthused about this leading man. He's emotionally dead.
This almost feels like it is the series finale as opposed to the pilot.
Yeah,
because this could wrap up with Pike's story, finding in, you know, and he could have either run away with Vina or, you know, found his new mojo, and they could have gone sailing into the stars. But starting the episode like, I've been in space too long and I'm sick of it, is a weird start for something so radical as this was at the time.
Star Trek 9, so very tired. But I mean, it's basically parallel to what we talked about with the Strange New World stuff. No spoilers there, but it's like, well, now I forget what point I was going for. I did my Star Trek Simpsons joke, and I'm like, that's all I got for him.
Well, no, because it is a point. Like in the beginning of Strange New Worlds, like, no spoilers, obviously, but Pike starts almost emotionally in kind of the same place, and has to be rejuvenated by what he goes through and about, you know, through inspiring a civilization and his crew. But it's almost very interesting that, like, a lot of these elements are taken through for a pilot that doesn't work. Like, there is a lot of elements in here that don't gel and create a cohesive product, but a lot of the individual elements taken on their own, like, you take them, you shine them off a little bit, and they still hold true. And that's why it's an interesting pilot, not necessarily an entertaining one, but it is interesting, especially from a Star Trek history perspective.
What I want to say, it's the conversation we had about Paul Wesley, where it's like, well, you're seeing one slice of a character for one episode. And, you know, what does this character become in someone else's hands? Well, look at Spock, and obviously they repurposed Majel for a different character, but, like, this is not the Spock we're seeing through the next 3 seasons. Definitely and then not. Through all the movies. Right. So, you know, if we see Jeffrey Hunter 15 years from now in a movie, is he going to be the same sort of deadpan emotionless? Well, no, not really. And so,
yeah,
it is just the pilot.
This franchise is like, the hallmark of this franchise is sort of reinventing itself after kind of a stumble out of the gate. Like, you reshoot this pilot, the motion picture is kind of iffy, and then Wrath of Khan is knocking it out of the park. Take it easy, Idol. Take it easy. You know, a lot of these, a lot of the series and the franchises sort of make adjustments on character and design that end up improving the shows.
Yeah, it's very rare for a Star Trek project to hit the ground running, as it were. It's very rare for that to happen. And you need a few false starts. You need a few, we tried this here and it didn't quite work, but we can take this element here. And you can definitely see why they chose the bits that they did to keep. Like, Leonard Nimoy is very much underutilized, like, knowing what we know now of his talents here, but he is at least one of the more animated sort of by personality, especially compared to what it would be later. Just because he doesn't get enough to do. Well, yeah.
You know, that's true. Out of all the main cast in this episode, the Vulcan is the most emotive.
It's really funny.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I definitely even refer to him by his race name, do they? They just make it obvious that he's alien because he's green and he's got the ears.
You don't get Vulcanian until I think where No Man Has Gone Before, very possibly. We'll get there. Okay, guys, go around the table. Best and worst moment. Start with you, Otto.
Oh, thanks for the heads up.
Do you need more time to think?
I don't know. It's kind of random. It's probably not the best, but it's what I can think of now. Susan Oliver going for the jugular when they're fighting the bad guy, who I'm pretty sure is repurposed for Gamesters of Triskelion. Like she gets more damage on the big oaf than Pike does, because they're banging each other's swords and shield, and it's like she jumps on him from behind and bites his neck, and like she really goes for it. So you gotta have some kind of fight scene in the pilot. So I don't know if well done is the proper phrase, but it's certainly entertaining to watch. I like
Steak
that.
well done. It's edible, but you wish it was better.
Yeah.
How about you, Shai?
Wait, was that both your best moment and worst moment?
I'd say best or worst. You can choose either.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, her acting in that scene is really, really questionable. When they're fighting the guy wearing John Wayne's Genghis Khan outfit. What is the best? I mean, just I love Spock shouting, "The women!" when the women are kidnapped from the transporter pad.
He does it with that kind of the women, like he projects his hands as well. We lost them.
Well, because as you mentioned,
got his acting credit there.
like as you mentioned, all the acting is pretty subdued in this pilot, but then Nimoy, who's probably the best thing in the pilot, is like going for it there. So it's a little incongruous with the rest of the episode, but I love that.
Okay, stars, go on.
So, best moment I would probably say is Vina and Pike in Illusory Space Mojave, just because even though the set is very obviously fake, like I imagine probably it looked a lot more convincing on a smaller set. I love the subtle world building details, like you can see in the background that even though this is the Mojave, it's still like big space structures in the map painting. You get your few bits where Pike / Jeffrey Hunter is actually seemingly getting into it, and he's just like actually emoting and getting emotionally invested in something. You get an actual character trait, which is he likes horses. Okay, that's something I can relate to. Horses are cool. And it's like I like the conversation they have where it's the domesticity of we're sitting at a picnic versus the intellectual horror of we're trapped in a little laboratory where they're just poking and prodding us to see what will make us fuck. And it's like there's a really interesting dichotomy there.
Paraphrased, obviously.
Getting down the brass tacks, that's what it's about.
That was the original script.
That was Gene's notes, yeah.
They gone fuck.
They gone fuck. But it's like there's a glimmer of you can see kind of where they decided this relationship was worth keeping and where it was why Pike would be rejuvenated by that, because there is an emotional connection that comes through in that scene that feels a lot more honest, and there's just a bit of animation to it. Probably worst moment, it's got to be the slave trader moment, because it's horrific.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of meant to be horrific in context.
They even have people in turbans in the back playing the flute and everything. So
everything that could be problematic is there. By
I think we were missing someone in brown face, but I'm sure that at least one of them was. I
mean, if you watch that in black and white, the green paint, they would look like they were in brown face anyway. So
yeah, I'm sure it's meant to be like exploitative and gross, but it's like, especially viewing it in that 60s perspective with I'm not used to women on the bridge and unusual feminine drives. It just does not rub the right way. It just comes across very gross.
And yet in the 2000s, Enterprise was like, you know what? I think we can do it better. Let's try it again. Let's run this back.
Yeah.
I think.
And yet, Kelby was the worst part of that episode in Enterprise.
Somehow, it's true.
I think the conversation with Pike and Boyce at the start, where he's consoling him in his quarters, I really like that, and
that's great.
It's a nice sort of introspection into the life of a starship captain and what Pike is suffering from. I quite really connected to that. It's quite cool, and the idea that every doctor in Starfleet should be an old country doctor from an old western just seems to track. So.
Yeah,
They even
'cause
have that. They even deliver that Shawshank line where it's like, "You get busy living, you get busy dying." It's like you have two types of patients: the living and the dead, or whatever they said. So.
Yeah. And it says a lot about how good that scene is that they've referenced it like 3 or 4 times. Like Star Trek Beyond basically lifts the entire conversation. Strange New Worlds does its own version with Pike again, although it's on a different subject matter. I'm sure I could find other examples of it,
No,
but it's just
they
like
do it in Wrath of Khan when he brings him like the Romulan ale.
yeah, it's like
Like
something about that relationship of the captain and the doctor is just like there's something very Star Trek about that, and I'm not sure if it's like a holdover from like military dramas where the medic is always outside the chain of command to a degree, but something about that it does have a lot of promise, and you can definitely see why they gave the role of the Doctor to DeForest Kelly later on, because it's like you need a good actor in that role, and Boyce is very good.
I think my headcanon now is that Shatner's lifelong obsession with horses came about because he wanted to one-up Jeffrey Hunter's best scene from the pilot. So he's like, this guy likes horses? I can do that even better.
Like horses and mountains.
I could do horses. I'll get my shirt off too.
Yeah. Okay. Pop quiz for you guys. If I can just find it in my document. Boy. Give me. Hang on a minute. Oh damn it! Where's it gone? I've lost my notes. I've lost my notes. Probably going to cut this all out.
Professionalism.
Absolutely.
I'm not the only one who has moments on the show.
Oh, here we go. No, here we go. Can you give me the 2 previous names of Captain Pike before it was decided Captain Pike?
Oh, I know one of them.
Okay.
Robert April.
Correct. Robert M. April was one of them. What was the other one that was in the second revised script? It was changed very shortly before filming, if you know it. Or if you've read Memory Alpha lately. No.
April.
Geraldo Rivera.
No, it was James Winter. So we nearly had Captain James Winter.
So we have April and Winter.
Yeah, definitely theming. And then Pike. And Kirk. So,
I mean, Pike is a very heroic. Pike and Kirk are very big old hero names. Like Winter and April are a bit more romantic.
Captain Longsword.
So yeah. In the original spec, the original spec for Star Trek back in, we'll go over this a little bit. The original spec in Star Trek in 1964 was produced to NBC, and it had basically what the show was about and a list of episodes that were going to be either considered or made produced. And obviously, it was Captain Robert M. April in command of the SS Yorktown cruiser class for a 5-year mission of galactic exploration and Class M investigation. He was to patrol the 9th quadrant. See, this is starting to sound a bit more Forbidden Planet, isn't it? Patrolled the 9th quadrant, which began at Alpha Centauri and extended to the Pineal Galaxy limit. The reasons for patrol were Earth security, scientific investigation, and assistance to aid Earth colonies. So yeah, that was the original spec script. Some of the episodes, which you might recognise some of these. So that was the first one they put in this document, which is, you can see this on Memory Alpha. One was called The Next Cage, which was the one we just watched. An episode called The Day Charlie Became God, which is pretty much Charlie X. One episode called President Capone, which then turned into a piece of the action. There's an episode just called The Women. Which I'm going to read you the description of this. Some hanky-panky occurs when escorting a cargo ship of women to a deep space colony, which is Mud's Women, isn't it? Yeah.
Mud's Women.
Mud's Women.
Wow.
Let's have a look. What else have we got
here? Prototype. It's all
that was actually the original title.
Yeah.
I'm glad that Jim wasn't lost to time.
Yeah. And here's one for you. This one's called Infection. A female crew member discovers she may be pregnant with alien larvae. What episode does that remind you of?
The Child?
Yes.
From TNG? Yeah. Wow.
That was an original script for the concept of
Trip Tucker.
Gene Roddenberry, madly in love with the idea of immaculate conception on a starship since 1964.
Absolutely, yeah. It is shown. A lot of these ideas got either scrapped or really hastily revised and redone before it turned in. Yeah, and then NBC
like the script actually just looked at it and went, "Gene, you're letting your horny show. You can't do that."
I mean, there was a lot of going back and forth script revisions until Gene Roddenberry decided, "Oh no, all these ideas are mine," and how about let's finish this up. Let's wrap it all up, guys. Who was your character of the episode? Who was your favorite person of the episode? Otto, go on.
Maggie Smith as the Telosian. That's
Oh.
no, I mean for all the ragging we did on Susan Oliver for the over-emoting, like without her, that would have been a really dry as cardboard. So I think it's probably her.
Well, they
she
could have
doesn't-
actually cast a good actress in that role too.
Well, yeah, but you could say that for all the characters,
In
pretty
the
much.
60s?
Yeah.
For that kind of money? Okay, go on, Shai. Who's your best character?
Oh, wait.
Spock or...
Hold on,
Oh,
hold
go
on.
on.
Can I dial this back? It's the guy in the blue uniform who stands on the bridge next to the turbo.
I couldn't stop looking at him. He's just like the entire time.
The turbo
The-
lift repair technician, that's what he was.
The only time he moves is to, like, click his heels together when someone walks out the door. But other than that, he just stands stone still.
I've never noticed him until
The
we
little-
rewatched this episode, and he was just there the entire time, and I'm like, no, I can't look away.
That's the thing you get on older television. There's always little bits. Like, there's a bit that every time Pike would run into his new yeoman, he'd look up and there would be a crewman standing there who would then quickly walk away after they make eye contact. And they repeat that bit at the end of the episode when he runs into her again. Like that discomfort.
Can we talk about? Sorry,
What were you
Shai,
gonna
cut
say?
you off. Can we just talk about when they go into warp for the first time and there's no like CG shot? They just stand on the bridge and they put stars and play the song. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, they gotta make the most of that theme song. Either Spock or number one, like they just popped. Both of them just popped. The Doctor popped too, but like you can see why Roddenberry kind of fought to keep Spock on that show because even though Nimoy hasn't settled into that role the way he eventually did, he's by far the most interesting thing out of that, outside of the ship itself.
Mm.
Yeah, not much actually given to the ship. Like, it was quite a unique design, but it's only in a couple of establishing shots and then nothing till right at the end. We don't see much at the
Well,
end.
you
that's
get
why-
a phaser gun off it and use it to blow a hole in the planet, but
I think that's like right before the credits, they just have the ship flying back and forth 6 times, like just to show that, hey, we have a great model.
I mean, the TOS intro isn't that much different.
Yeah.
You definitely get more Enterprise over planets. The Enterprise more in threat. You know, you get more interaction with the ship than you do here, which surprised me for essentially one of the heroes of the show. But let's go on. Sky, what's your Sky? No,
Stars.
Brain.
The moon.
Sorry,
Do you want to
mate.
keep on going?
Satellite.
Go on,
you know what?
Nebula.
Thank you, Otto. I actually would probably say the actor for the Keeper, the Telosian, because while we've been ragging on the overall presentation, it is a really interesting choice for your first alien. And the makeup job is excellent. Like, even though it's 1964, it's still a really good effect with the, it's a very primitive effect, but you can absolutely see what it's doing. But it just looks great, and the fact that they don't overuse it, they don't call attention to it. They only do it like subtly when they're actually using their telepathy or casting an illusion. The weird effect that they get with combining the overdubbing over their obviously alien features. We ragged on the buttheads, but it's like it's kind of a very 60s and 50s vision of what an alien from the future would look like, especially one that had prioritized mental development. Like, it makes sense from that angle. And they are it's an interesting race because, they don't mean to be evil. It's like, it comes across very cack-handedly, and I think the Discovery did the concept a little bit better, but the idea that they're so alien that they don't kind of understand how human interaction works to the point where they have to poke and prod in a laboratory setting. And the actor does a good job of kind of getting that removal from humanity well. And I don't know, it's something about the Telosians just works, even though it's a very ultimately simple design. It's just a humanoid with a big head and a white robe, and yet there's something about them that's very unique, especially like the focus on illusions. Like, I feel like it just works in a way, and it's kind of more interesting than some TOS like alien designs where we've put a woman in some really nice makeup. That's an alien. believe us. You know?
Here's a dog
They
with
You
make
gotta
a
do
good
some with the
effort of
bridge of the
making it alien.
nose too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other one. That's the TNG method. What about you, Idol?
I've got to go with Boyce. Boyce, I've got a definite sort of soft spot for the old country doctor that wants to, or someone that's being the morale exposition. Because there's a moment in the middle of the episode, is like, what if we're all trapped like animals? How does this affect the human race? And he's very sort of like the morality play for the whole thing. And like everyone's like, yeah, shut up, Doctor. We're just going to fire these phases at this rock for a bit. But yeah, no, I liked him. I wish we'd
Shut up, science man. We have action things to do.
Yeah, I was definitely a fan of him. Okay, I got a question for you, Shy. Could Nicholas Meyer turn this episode into a movie?
Whole illusion thing. I mean, I guess they kind of did it in
With a big
Spider-Man: Far From Home. That's a big illusion.
The gold standard.
Yes.
I feel like if you were going to turn this into a movie, you'd need to have maybe a 5-minute montage of the Telosian development and how they destroyed themselves with illusions. That would get more emphasis. I feel like in
Kate
a movie.
Blanchett that's doing the voice.
Well, it would have to be.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's a good casting, actually. Yeah, that's a good pick.
Yeah.
It'd have to be like a super trippy Christopher Nolan, like Inception.
Yeah, layers
Doctor
on layers.
Strange visual age. You just have to really not know where you were. You could do it.
Yeah, because
it would have started with Pike and Spock coming back from their last mission on the shuttlecraft, and then it comes up to do the hero shot of the Enterprise from all different angles before it docks. There's like 20 minutes
of it. Yeah,
20 minutes.
27 minutes. We'll compromise. And you would probably go with something a little bit more visually interesting and more subtle than the screen shake effect for when an illusion happens, so you're not quite sure when the illusion is shifting. You could do some interesting stuff with that visually, I feel like, with a good director.
Okay, Stars, give us your rating metric.
All right, so, gentlemen, I need to know how many Telosian illusions of a horse named Tango out of 10 would you give this episode?
Also,
Are we giving them the benefit of context, or are we doing present day look back? How did it age type thing?
Keep personal, your own rating, and then we'll average it.
It doesn't even answer what I asked, but all right. Why are we really starting with me? We're like, oh no, go.
Just because.
Yeah. Alphabetical.
It's true, actually.
I have a lot of fun with it every time. I like I'm filling my mind with primitive hate, and it's just everything about it. Her overacting, the giant phaser gun that they bring down the planet. Everything about it's a fun romp. So, the era-appropriate misogyny and racism kind of brings it down, but I'll give it maybe 7.5 out of 10.
Wow. Shy?
Yeah, I give it a 7 because there's a lot of promise. The sets just needed a little repaint and to remove the little bendy, light fixture screens from the chairs and just a uniform tweak here and there. I actually like the old laser pistols.
They're a fun little prop.
The promise is there, and we're sitting here, 55 years later discussing Star Trek, so it must have done something right. So I give it a 7, a solid 7 out of 10 Telosian illusions of a horse named. What's the horse's name?
Tango. Thank you, Shy. I appreciate you. For me, it's probably going to be about a 7 out of 10. I think it averages out mostly because, actually, there's a lot of promise. It's really interesting on a Star Trek history basis alone, just on what survives, what doesn't, the oddities, how much is actually kind of already there and how much of it isn't. And if you look at it in context from the 60s, it is very different. And you can definitely see why they saw enough in it to bring it to an actual full series. But there is this case of that style. I feel like, especially with 60s style acting, you need to have basically touched it in its original context and or grown up with it to really appreciate it and not just laugh at it, because it is so easy to laugh at it. We've been laughing about poor Susan Oliver, and I'm sure that she was considered a fine actress at her time, but just doesn't. It's a very different style. Just doesn't age well. But she's doing her best, and guess what? this is the pilot for a show that came out last year, if you think about it in a weird way. So clearly there's something to it. So yeah, 7 out of 10 Telosian Illusions of a Horse Called Tango.
Well, now I don't want to say my rating because it wasn't going to be 7, but I feel peer pressured into. No, I'll go for a 6. I feel I'm a bit more sort of harsher on. No, not that much harsher. I enjoyed it. It was a ride, but there were definitely moments where I either went, oh, that's not good, or I felt like it plodded a bit in the middle. Like the pacing was a bit, it could have done with a bit of an uplift here and there. But good concept, good start for a series, and it's enjoyable. I enjoyed watching it. Definitely enjoyed laughing with you guys as well.
Yeah, there's plenty to riff on if you're looking for like a 60s artifact there.
Yeah. Who would you cast as Pike? And don't say Anson Mount in this setting. If the cage was turned into a film, who would we cast?
Bruce Greenwood.
Okay, right, not Bruce Greenwood either.
All right, square jaw, no emotion. Who we got out there?
Like Brad
Henry
Pitt.
Cavill.
Henry Cavill's not a bad show, actually. I could see that.
He's got the right hairstyle.
Yeah, we can do a Pike.
Little Ryan Gosling.
No, that's way too much humor for Pike.
Oh, we tried to like
Gosling would be
recreate the.
Kirk.
No, fuck it, Nicolas Cage. Let's go full the other way.
Oh god.
Nicolas Cage as the Telosian Keeper, I think, would be.
No, that's been done. I've seen that as a Photoshop, I'm sure.
That's right.
Yes, have you seen
That's
that?
amazing.
Because he's in a cage of emotion.
Oh god, that's terrible.
That's awful. That's
And
awful.
on that
I think
note, ladies and
we're
gentlemen.
done here. On that note, we'll be doing some more of these. We'll be doing the next pilot in the series, which we'll decide soon. Keep an eye on that. Come join our Discord for more conversation and join our subs on the Twitch channel. All the links will be down below. But we'll see you next time. Ta-ra!